Next up, we have John Henry November. He's an attorney with the Public Trust Environmental Legal Institute of Florida, and he will be talking about the gradual restoration of the wetlands within the DeBary Bayou.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Henry November. It's a pleasure to be here today. I do have to quickly weigh in on the biosolids thing because it's one of my passions in life. There is no basin management action plan for the upper St. John's, and that's where they're dumping all the biosolids. And so if there is no plan to reduce those biosolids, then we, the rest of the St. John's River, are going to feel the ramifications of those biosolids being placed up there. So Indian River, Brevard, Volusia, all the government entities in the area need to push DEP to establish a basin management action plan in that area so that we have the opportunity to not feel the ramifications of that in the future. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here to talk about the DeBary Bayou, which really does hit a lot closer to home here in this area. This initiative, the Public Trust was brought into this initiative by the Gemini Springs Alliance, which is a local group of citizens who have seen unfortunately, the decline of the bayou over the past many decades. I've heard stories from Charlie Gray about grabbing, I don't know, bats bigger than my body out of this bayou, and it's just not the case anymore. But it's not going to happen overnight, but there are steps that I'm going to talk about during our presentation that can allow for this area to be restored over time. Okay, great. So a little project background. The Florida Department of Transportation's I-4 Beyond the Ultimate is reconstructing large portions of I-4. They're expanding it from 6 to 10 lanes. There's 4 design segments. The one we're concerned with is the area that goes right over the St. John's River in the DeBary Bayou. The cost of the segment is around $572 million. That is the current plan. I've also read articles that they may be changing the plan, but under the current scenario, we have to assume that they're moving forward with the permits they've applied for at this point, which indicate that they're expanding from the 6 to 10 lanes. So who are we? First of all, we talked about the Gemini Springs Alliance. They're an amazing group of environmental advocates that are so passionate about this topic that they've made it a requirement that the Public Trust has to be involved in this to mobilize the community. And that's what we're really here to do today, is if this comes from a limited source of voices, we need like 1,000 squeaky wheels on this thing. That's the thing that's going to move the ball in the eyes of FDOT. Engaging agencies, engaging politicians, engaging anyone who can have a real impact on the plans for how this restoration is going to take place needs to get involved. Okay, so this gives a little idea. I'm sure much of you are familiar with the project area. Gemini Springs, which we all know right now is impaired for fecal call form and some other parameters, but there's hope that through all the efforts that are being made directly upstream of that in the towns of DeBary, in Volusia County, that's going to get better and better over time. But if we don't do a good job of restoring the environmental wrongs that were done in 1959 when they constructed I-4, all those efforts may be for naught. Paget Creek, if you look, runs from Gemini Springs, and it's the one area where there's connectivity between Lake Monroe and Gemini Springs currently. It's a true channel, but if you look down here, this is all mostly impacted wetlands. They used to be very functioning. If you look at the system here, it was a very different situation. Now, with the construction of the dike of I-4, it's been closed up, and none of these wetlands are truly functioning. That is Rossiter Pond, the big brown nutrient-filled cesspool. That is a problem right now. And should I use that?
I can hear you, mind up. I'm thinking
They probably can hear me. Okay, I knew it. And this is Mullet Lake here, which may be spring-fed. We have some reason to believe that it is spring-fed. And so there's lots of opportunities to restore this area. And even if FDOT does not do what we hope that they do, there are going to be some things that we're going to talk about that are happening as of right now that I think you guys will be pretty excited about. So how did this system work historically? Pre-I-4, the prevailing winds kind of come up like this into the system, and it created some upland berms. It created some protection to the springs. It was all changed, really. This whole upland area here, that's where that cesspool is now. They dug all that out and put it onto I-4 to build the dike that now crosses that 4-mile expansion. The National Marine Fisheries has determined that the proposed expansion would degrade essential fish habitat across I-4. So that's one of the reasons that FDOT is doing some remediation, doing some restoration on the area. And the additional construction and expansion of the road would affect the natural hydro periods that existed, the sheet flow that doesn't exist anymore because there is no way for the water to make its way to Lake Monroe. And also there's no way for the sediment to get out, and there's no surface water exchange, which generally has water quality benefits. And we'll get more into that in a second. If you've been in the bayou, it's pretty depressing how much the invasive species have taken over. It's become I think some estimates, like 90% of the vegetation in there is invasive, and the habitat quality has been degraded significantly over time since the construction of I-4. So just to give you a little idea of how the whole system works, the Gemini Springs addition is owned by Volusia County, but St. Johns River Water Management District has a conservation easement over it to ensure that the restoration that has begun as a result of the purchase of the property and the future plans for restoration continue to happen. It's not a done deal, I guess I'll say. It's a work in progress how this property is going to be restored, and we're hopeful that FDOT and other partners participate in the enhancement of that restoration plan. Volusia County is responsible for the management activity per the terms of the conservation easement. And as of right now, they've been removing about 1 acre of invasive species per year. This is 1,000 acres. So 1 acre is not going to do a lot. However, that has changed recently, and I think you guys will be happy to hear that there's some positive momentum through a few partnerships to really make this a lot better. So, as a result of their impacts to the non-tidal wetlands and to the essential fish habitat, FDOT is currently proposing that they're going to do this 100-foot wide bridge, which is located right here. The reason why they selected that area is it has one of the lowest elevations, and therefore it would create the largest opportunity for some connectivity. If you notice, there is no channel proposed. It's just an opportunity for at high water times for the water to exchange back and forth across I-4. That's important to understand because if it was a channel, there may be some concerns that if there was at some points degraded water quality in Lake Monroe, that it would just immediately just channel and rush right over to the springs. That's not the case. This is an opportunity for natural sheet flow to happen over time at times of high water, which from a scientific perspective is very important. In addition, for the non-tidal wetlands, they're actually talking about putting money into a mitigation bank and not doing any mitigation on site. That is the main focus when I ask you to do public comment in relation to the permits. That's what we want to focus on as a community, is asking FDOT to do mitigation on site and not pay a bank who's going to go and do something some other place in Florida. We have plenty that we need to do right here. Let's make sure that they know that our community is very dedicated to the idea of taking and do that money and doing some restoration here on site. So when I visited with the Gemini Springs Alliance last time, they were like, John, and we were talking about how challenging of an uphill battle this can be to get FDOT to do a redesign of their mitigation. Well, they did it in the Wekiva Parkway. The Wekiva Parkway is a tremendously expensive project, but if you look at an article from Florida Politics, it said FDOT had to draw on complex engineering and construction that were critical in winning over the approval from the environmental and conservation community. When I met with FDOT recently, the gentleman who kind of spearheaded that project was in the room, and he said, "Thank you so much for pointing that out, because we're so proud of that." In my opinion, DeBerry Bayou it's Wekiva Parkway is amazing, and you're kind of comparing apples to oranges, but DeBerry Bayou is also very regionally significant. It's a very special place. Gemini Springs is a very special place. This deserves our attention as a community. And so I'm hopeful that our elected officials in Tallahassee, Washington, and even our local elected officials in the local municipalities decide that it's worth spending some additional capital to make this happen. And it doesn't have to be our money. It could be applying for grants. And like I said, this isn't going to happen overnight. But putting a plan together and sticking to it and making it happen, I think it can be a very effective grant program, because it's near many springs. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration, which is always attractive to grantors who are determining where some grant money should go. I think this can be a model. I think the Wekiva Parkway can be a model for what we can do here. And that is another, and you could include that as part of your public comment as well, as say, why, if you did it in Wekiva, why not here, right? So what are our goals for restoration in the DeBerry Bayou? Restore the areas of the health of the wetlands. Right now they're significantly degraded, but there is hope. Basically, because we know how rich in quality those wetlands were before I-4. So most of our initiative is geared towards getting as close as we can to that historical condition. So we want to expand and restore habitat. So you fix the wetlands, that's also going to fix habitat for fish, ducks, everything else that uses this historic area. And then improve the overall water quality. So we understand that this is going to cost money. So when we are asking FDOT to redesign and look at their project, we want them to do it in the most ecologically beneficial and cost-effective way. So I'm hoping that they see that our community understands that this project already is costing $572 million. However, if we have a chance to not just restore for that expansion that's happening now, but if we can actually fix a historical wrong that we all can see that happened in 1959, isn't it time for our state to do that? I think it is. So we were very pleased that the St. Johns River Water Management District agreed to do a full hydrological connectivity study to show what the impacts would be of connecting Lake Monroe and the DeBerry Bayou area. Some of the conclusions from that study. They said that a significant increase in volume exchange comes with the opening of the southwest side of the bayou. The larger the opening, the greater the exchange flow. So this greater exchange flow will result in lower residence times, and that almost always has increased water quality benefits and habitat benefits. The assessment also concluded that vegetation rehab and berm removal further increases volume exchange and the associated water quality benefits. So that berm removal and vegetation rehab, that's the type of thing that we could use that on-site mitigation for, as opposed to shipping it off to Miami or wherever else it may go. Although it's still in its preliminary stages, this assessment that we asked them to do was amazing timing, because at that exact same time, FWC had come to the Water Management District and said, hey, we want to do a pilot program to work on the mechanical harvesting of invasive species and use that removal of the invasive species for water quality credits that can be used as part of the BMAP process. And so, luckily enough, our timing was just right, and now, I don't want to speak for Water Management District because I know if anybody's here, they're going to want to it's their project. We're so thrilled about it, and FWC, that they are actually taking steps to begin that pilot project this month. So they're going to be having a mechanical harvester out there, which is truly the best way to remove invasive species. The idea of spraying them with chemicals and just letting them lay there, yes, It's amazing. So no matter what, that's going to lead to a gradual enhancement of the DeBerry Bayou. But what we want them to do is more than that. Yeah. So what are we proposing for FDOT now? What we'd like them to think about doing is reconsider a little redesign, guys, right? Come on. Easier said than done, I think. But they did not have that analysis done by the Water Management District at their fingertips when they did the initial design. So, it gives them the opportunity to say, well, we didn't have all the information at our fingertips. We haven't heard much from the community, which they said that in our meeting, that, why would we do this? We're only hearing from the Gemini Springs Alliance. Well, that's got to change today. This is the nexus point. This is the opportunity for us to shift as a community and say, this project matters. We're going to communicate with the FDOT and our elected officials to let them know that we need this project to become a priority moving forward. The major point that we want them to do is we want them to work with the Army Corps and the Water Management District to alter the design plans to complete mitigation on site, as opposed to purchasing credits at a mitigation bank. So once the hydrological connectivity has been completed, then there can be additional, it all has to happen at the same time. It's not this, then that. All these approaches need to happen at the same time. And it includes enhancing that hydrological connectivity that we've talked about, enhanced stormwater and wastewater treatment and sediment removal. So that would include source control above the spring. And I've met with both the city of DeBerry and the county of Volusia, and I was very impressed by that meeting and walked away seeing how much they are doing to be resilient to the threats of nutrients in the system. They're just did 2 new baffle boxes right above Gemini Springs, and more is coming. They're doing some additional analysis right now to determine how to do it best, but they are moving that ball ahead. So when I told FDOT that, they were thrilled, because for a while it felt like everything was stagnant. The Army Corps did a full analysis of this whole system about 10 years ago, and in their perspective, things kind of sat for a while. But when they heard what was going on in the area, they really started to feel a lot better about potentially being partners and maybe even bringing money to the table. They said they have money that they could put towards these projects. And I need to get with the county, and I see some county and city folks here to talk about that, because the idea of, I know there's limited tax base and everything here in this area. The idea of having some other money available to make this project happen, that's pretty exciting. We also need, we're talking about this right now, but to continue to enhance it. That's going to include some dredging long term. That's expensive, unfortunately. From the estimates that we put together, that's going to cost somewhere between $5 million and $7 million. And from the Water Management District's perspective, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that kind of dredging work if we haven't already fixed the source control issues, if we haven't made sure that we're not trying to put a Band-Aid on a gash. This is a major problem that we need to make sure that we are controlling the source input that's coming into the area, rather than just dredge it out and then see the sedimentation and the nutrients build up again. So I'm seeing that being a little down the road, but it doesn't mean that we need to get everything done first before we do that sediment removal. Looking for grants and opportunities to make that happen starts now. The invasive species removal, we talked a little bit about that, all the benefits. It will reduce sediment accumulation rates. The water quality benefits of having functioning wetlands there, not invasive species, are significant. And the habitat improvements that will come as a result of the wetlands being more functioning. The pilot project is happening with FWC, and now we want, and the really cool thing is that they're going to be able to gain some credits, water quality credits, which has really never been done before, which could help pay for additional harvesting to happen in the bayou over time. Because unfortunately, money is the thing that drives all of this work. If there was unlimited funds, I'm sure we'd have this done tomorrow. But we have to show the benefits gradually over time, and then as we do that, we're going to be able to have the financial ability to continue this restoration process. So the campaign next steps, this is why I'm here today. This is why GSA was so happy to be here as part of our partnership, is we need widespread community participation. When FDOT said that they're only hearing a few squeaky wheels, why would we spend the $10 million or whatever it may be to do this additional hydrological connectivity? Well, that's got to change. They need to hear that this is an important project. Over 90% of the funding from FDOT comes from the federal government. There is money out there. The idea of having this project be $582 million versus $572 million, I think is something that is palatable to FDOT, but they need to hear that the community wants it. That's the only way that I think that this is going to happen, in addition to the, hearing it from the top as well, which we're really hopeful that once we do a little more environmental water quality monitoring, which is going to be happening over the next couple months to ensure that we're not having any unintended consequences by opening this up, at that point I think we'll have the assurances in place to be able to move forward. Because what we don't want to do is create a bigger problem than what exists today. And so once we have that water quality data in hand, then we will have the capacity to make those inferences about how opening up I-4 would work. Okay, so what's going on as a result of the harvesting of the invasive species is that FDEP is putting this pilot project together where you're determining how to get paid for doing the harvesting. But the only way to show the benefits of that is to determine what the water quality is now, what the water quality is during the removal, and what the water quality in the area is going to be afterwards. So we really lucked out as a community because we're going to get a handle in the short term how the water quality is in the DeBerry Bayou. If it's worse than it is in and that's what the water management expects, that it's going to be worse in the DeBerry Bayou than it's going to be in Lake Monroe, then it's going to be a no-brainer to do the hydrological connectivity. If it's the same, very similar. It's going to once again be a no-brainer to do the hydrological connectivity. They're going to have to draw some inferences because they're not going to be able to model over a 10-year period because we just have very, very limited data within the bayou. But they will be able to, through 2 or 3 months of monitoring right between the wet and dry season, we're going to get a pretty good idea of the water quality in the bayou. And because of that, we're going to be able to make some conclusions about how this is. I want to know if it's definitely going to make things better. Like, if there's any doubt, I'm going to have serious concerns about championing this moving forward. And I know the city and the county feel the same way. So we're going to hopefully put those fears to rest here in the next month or two when we get some more water quality data. And then at that point, we'll be able to move forward with a unified front. And at that same point, we're going to be developing the marketing materials and everything else that we need so that you guys will have the tools at your fingertips to be able to communicate with your elected officials and others in the area who need to get on board of this initiative. So I'll have a little pamphlet out there with my contact information on this slide. But if you guys would, if you're taking notes, write down the permit number from the St. Johns River Water Management District and the permit number from the Army Corps of Engineers. For the Water Management District, it's relatively easy. You go on their website, you search St. Johns River Water Management District, thank you. And that will give you the opportunity to make public comment on both of these. So if you don't make public comment, in the future, if there is any potential litigation related to this issue, you're precluded from participating. We need to get in on the ground level and make sure that we make comment to say what's happening right now is not good enough because we want to see on-site mitigation. We want to see this be an important project. You did this for the Opaiba Parkway. This area is just as significant. Work with us to make this happen. We really want this to be a collaborative process. We know FDOT is pulled in a million different directions. They just need to hear that this project matters, and I think we'll get a positive outcome. So we're in the middle of building that community support. Once they issue the permits, we're going to have to consider whether we want to do a legal challenge. That's going to be, it's not the approach I like to take. I like to take a collaborative approach over an adversarial approach, but if they don't listen and if they don't move off just doing a straight redesign, then that may become necessary. Hopefully, through the mobilization of local, state, and federal politicians, that'll also stop us. Because we're not saying stop. You can continue to work on your plans, but just consider slowing down and using the new information that you have at your fingertips to make a decision that makes more sense for this area. We need water quality monitoring data, and thankfully we've lucked out. The Water Management District's going to be able to start on that almost immediately, and that will allow us to determine if there will be any unintended consequences of expanding hydrological connectivity. But I've talked to engineers, I've talked to scientists when this concern was brought up to me recently, and they feel very confident that by returning this area to its historical condition and creating that hydrological connectivity and allowing that sheet flow to happen will allow for water quality benefits. It'd be very different if we were talking about a channel. That's not a good idea. But allowing these wetlands to once again function like they historically did, they feel very, very confident that there's not going to be unintended consequences as a result of that initiative. And by doing that water quality monitoring, we're going to be able to do the additional modeling and draw the inferences we need to be assured that this is the right project. So we have a once in a generation opportunity to push on this, guys. Once this thing gets put on the shelf, which that's what FDOT wants, they want to get through this permit process, put it on the shelf. They're not going to begin construction right now because the funds aren't available. I've been told by many attorneys that once they put that thing on the shelf, they're not going to take it back off. So we need to make this push right here now in the next few months. The Water Management District hasn't made a request for additional information, which is going to slow down the process a little bit, but we need to be ready to move on all fronts.